So good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on e-invoicing, Ireland's VAT modernisation and what you need to know. First of all, I'll introduce Kinore. We are a firm of over 80 staff specialised in offering compliance and business support services, outsourced bookkeeping, payroll and management accounts. We are a multi-award winning online accountancy and company secretary firm supporting SMEs across Ireland, Northern Ireland and the UK. My name is Roisin Mulcahy and I'm the Head of Client Services at Kinore. And I'm standing in for Christina today. I'm joined by Kiera McFeely, who is the Head of Cloud Services at Kinore, and Kiera leads our bookkeeping, VAT, payroll and company secretary teams and has prepared an overview of the changes you need to be ready for in e-invoicing. It is important to note that this webinar is for general information purposes only. For specific advice, we always recommend reaching out directly to an expert and we'll share our details at the end. That being said, Kiera will cover a lot of key information which has been launched by Revenue so far. She'll hopefully have time at the end for some questions. So please engage and use the chat or Q&A feature and I'll pose your questions to her on your behalf. I'll now hand this over to Kiera.
All right, thanks, Roisin. And good morning, everybody. Very welcome. I am just going to move slides here now. If it'll let me, there we go. So this is kind of an overview of what we're going to cover today. What really e-invoicing is, what that real-time reporting requirement is, Ireland's plan for this phased rollout, and what kind of businesses really should know now and what plans they should be putting in place. All right, so we'll just start with what is e-invoicing. Now, when we're talking about e-invoicing, we're not talking about PDFs or email attachments or scanned documents. E-invoicing means invoices as structured data. So it's created and exchanged in a standard format that accounting systems can read automatically. It's one system essentially talking to another. And the line we're hearing a lot is e-invoicing is invoices as data, not documents. So that's a key kind of takeaway. And because e-invoicing uses a standard format, that means there's no manual entry, no chasing, missing details, and the invoices arrive automatically, validated and ready for you to post to your accounting system. All right, so why is Ireland rolling this out now? That's the question we're hearing a lot. E-invoicing isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a much bigger program called VAT Modernisation. And this is Revenue's multi-year plan to digitise how VAT information flows, not just between businesses, but also how it gets remitted to the Revenue themselves. There's essentially two pillars that's driving this change. Firstly is the modernising how invoices move between businesses. Structured e-invoicing creates a cleaner, faster, and actually more accurate flow of data. In theory, it reduces errors and fraud and admin, and it's aligning Ireland with what's already happening in the EU. Businesses will need to comply with these new VAT modernisation rules if they want to continue to avail that 0% VAT arrangement, which currently exists for those cross-border type sales. EU estimates actually indicate that e-invoicing will help reduce VAT fraud by 11 billion annually, which is a huge figure. So there's obviously a benefit to doing this. It'll also bring down that administrative cost and compliance costs for businesses. And that's quite a significant estimate there as well over the 10 years. I think they've said it's 4.1 billion. Secondly, then the introduction of real-time reporting. So there's the modernisation, there's the real reporting. So the e-invoicing and the real reporting. So today, VAT returns are based on summary information that's submitted weeks or even months after an activity happens. And under the new model, key invoice data will be reported to Revenue in real time. So at the moment the invoice is issued. And this gives Revenue better visibility. It reduces the time gap between the activity and get reported, and ultimately simplifies compliance for businesses. So the two places really fit together. E-invoicing and real-time reporting go hand in hand. You can't have real-time reporting without structured invoice data, and you can't get that from PDFs. So in summary, you've got e-invoicing that standardizes the data. You've got the real-time reporting that sends that data to Revenue instantly. And then together, those make up that new VAT modernisation program. Why this matters for SMEs is this isn't just necessarily a compliance change, it's an operational one. So it affects how you issue your invoices, how you receive them, how your accounting software works, and ultimately how your VAT returns get prepared. So, but the good news is it's a phased rollout, and that's intentional, which I'll get into in a bit. But there's time to prepare, essentially, is the comfort I want to give everybody that's listening today. The earlier you can start to make yourself aware, though, and to look at your systems, your workflows, and prep for this change, the smoother that transition is going to be for you, though. Okay, so let's look at the rollout itself. So, as I mentioned, it is a phased rollout, which means that what we're going to focus on today is how that kind of affects that phased rollout affects the Irish SME. Irish SME. There's three phases. So in November 2028, so that's the first phase. This first phase really is focusing on those larger corporates. So revenue defines that larger corporate as a business that's managed under their large corporates division, which is essentially multinationals and bigger Irish groups. So it won't affect the vast majority of businesses. Phase one is not something that SMEs need to worry about from an issuing point of view. So you won't have to issue e-invoices in phase one. You won't have to report in real time, but you will need to be ready to receive e-invoices from your larger suppliers because they have to send them to you. So the first operational change from an SME point of view is your accounts payable side. So making sure that your systems can accept those structured e-invoices instead of PDFs, and making sure that your supplier onboarding process captures a lot of the right details. There'd be really strict formatting and around what details you need to record for these invoices. Okay, I'm going to go on to phase two. So phase two rolls out in November 2029. And during this phase, it's going Irish SMEs. So this is where some of you will start to filter in. It'll only apply to Irish SMEs who are trading B2B in other EU countries. So if you're an SME with EU B2B sales, you enter at phase two. And once you're in, you need to start issuing e-invoices for your domestic B2B sales and real-time report those. So the trigger is the cross-border activity, but actually the obligation only applies to your Irish business customers first.
And Kiera, why
Yep.
did Revenue choose EU B2B traders for phase two?
It's a really good question, right? And there is a specific logical reason behind it. So Revenue chose those SMEs that trade B2B in all EU states for phase two because this group is going to be affected by the EU's VITA plan. So VITA being that VAT in the digital age. So VITA will make cross-border B2B EU invoices mandatory in the EU within by 2030. So Ireland really needs those businesses to be ready for that change because it is coming down the line. This stage approach by Revenue has been intentional. It's kind of to allow business to get familiar with this new process. They recognize it as a significant change for businesses and how they operate. And the thought behind this is the phased approach will allow them to kind of iron out any of those teething problems to begin with and be ready for that obligation in 2030. Okay, so right, that brings us nicely on to phase three. So phase three is rolling out in July 2030, and that's when that deadline for the EU alignment kicks in. All SMEs will be included in phase two. All SMEs who were included in phase two must now start issuing e-invoices for their B2B EU cross-border sales, along with the domestic ones that have already been reported in phase two. Those invoices need to report in real time as well. So all of their B2B sales at that point will be remitted as part of this new process. So really it boils down to the 3 points, just to almost like summarize it, right? November 2080 is all about being ready to receive e-invoices. November 2080. November 20, that's a long way away. November 2028, you need to be ready for your e-invoices to receive them. And November 2029 is about those B2B EU sales. It's about the invoices that you're issuing into your B2B sales. Sorry, I'm getting tongue twisted here. In November 2029, if you trade B2B within the EU, you need to start issuing e-invoices for your Irish B2B sales. Hopefully that got there then. In July 2030, you extend that e-invoicing out to your EU B2B sales. So hopefully that makes sense.
And Kiera, if you're an Irish SME that does not trade B2B in another EU state, when are you included?
So if you're an SME that only trades within Ireland, you will be included after July 2030, but there's no definite date yet. But it is coming down the line.
Right.
All right. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the part that probably everyone is the most curious about and wants to understand is how this works practically and what their software fits in. Because while e-invoice and real-time reporting sounds like a big regulatory change, the truth is it really is a software story and how that's going to facilitate this change. It's about how your systems create invoices, how they receive them, and how they pass that data on to Revenue. And for SMEs, software is what's going to help bridge the gap and facilitate this change. Under the new rules, invoicing can't be PDFs anymore. They have to be created in a structured, machine readable format. And that means your accounting and invoice systems need to be able to generate EN 16931 compliant invoices. Say that 10 times fast. And then they need to be able to send those through a channel like PayPal, and they need to be able to validate that data before it goes out. And this is not something a business can do manually. Software really has to do that heavy lifting for them.
So, Kiera, what is an EN 16931 compliant invoice?
It always makes me laugh whenever we say this because it's a bit of a tongue twister. But essentially, it's an invoice that's created in a standard structured European format that software can read automatically. So it's not a PDF, it's not a scan, it's just pure data. It's the official EU standard for e-invoicing, and every country rolling out mandatory e-invoicing, including Ireland, is required to use it. Essentially, it's an XML file. It has to have really strict format there. So it's got seller VAT number, the buyer VAT number, VAT rates, that kind of thing. There's a load of data that's in that, and then that all be part of your e-invoice. And then whenever you're doing your real time, parts of that get filed, or the revenue will pick up certain pieces of that data. Okay, let me see.
Perfect. And then, Kiera, what is PEPL?
Okay, so PEPL is it stands for Pan European Public Procurement Online. Again, say that 10 times fast. But essentially it's a global e-network that over 40 countries are using. Actually some Irish public sector bodies are already using it for e-invoicing since I think 2019. Uses a set of standards, so all systems speak the same language. It's a secure channel, so invoices will never go to the right business. And it's going to be the main route that Ireland will use for rolling out the invoicing. All right, so all right, from 2028, large corporates will stop sending PDFs. They'll send structured e-invoices instead. So for SMEs, your accounts payable system needs to be able to ingest that structured file, be able to match your POs and your approval process, and post that data automatically to your accounting software. So again, it's all driven by software. And part of the goal is really to eliminate manual entry and reduce errors. If you think about the VAT system up to now, it's all been very manual with your filings and everything. So it's trying to modernize that VAT process. We've had a lot of modernization in payroll. We haven't seen the same VAT. So this is kind of revenue's way of stepping that up and also complying with that EU standard. Excuse me. So when real-time reporting does go live, businesses won't manually send data to revenue for what falls under that e-invoicing rules. Your system will do it automatically in the background. So software will extract that data, package it up correctly, and then transmit that to revenue. And for most SMEs, the process itself won't feel any different than issuing an invoice today. The reporting happens kind of in the background. The system facilitates it. Okay. So it's important now to understand how your system works, and choosing the right system really matters. Some platforms will handle everything automatically. Others might need, like bridging software, third-party connectors to make this happen. And some older softwares just really won't be fit for purpose anymore. So the real question for an SME today isn't how do I comply? It's more about, is my software ready to comply for me? And now, on a positive note, most modern cloud systems are ready and preparing for this. They know the timelines, they know the standards that have to be met, and they're building that functionality now. Several Irish accounting platforms already have e-invoice in place. I'm thinking of things like Accounts IQ, Big Red Cloud, and I think SERP as well. There's a lot of international systems as well that have PEPL and e-invoice, and like Xero and Sage and QuickBooks. And they'll have to switch on, I guess, Irish specific features for revenue, for readiness for this rollout. So for an SME, the important thing is to note that you don't need to be an e-invoice expert. You just need to make sure that you're on a software that's compliant and that can support the new rules. So the key takeaway really is e-invoicing is a technology change, not a paperwork change. And software will be what will do a lot of the work. And SMEs just need to make sure that they're on the right tools. That's what's really important. Okay, so that's kind of a lot of the content. I'm conscious there's a lot of information there. So no doubt there'll be questions that need to be answered.
Yes. Thank you very much for that, Kiera. That was really, really informative. So we have a few questions in the Q&A and in the chat. I think you've answered some of them, but just I suppose in the interest of transparency, I will read them out again just to make sure that we're fully covered.
No
So
problem.
we've a question here. We've already been asked to provide e-invoices to several clients in the EU, Netherlands, Sweden, and Finland. There currently seems to be intermediate software options. We're struggling to understand if there is a single solution. For example, can we adjust Zero to do this?
It's a good question, and I think it's quite specific probably to that client's own software. Zero have the facility, like I said, they definitely have it in place because Zero is in multiple different jurisdictions already. So the technology is there. Um, it would be worth reaching out to Zero to see if they can have that turned on maybe now, or if they indeed need to put in a bridging software because they maybe don't have it rolled out fully for Ireland yet, that they can just turn it on. Um, but definitely specific advice on your software is the key there. And this is for all businesses. You need to take a look at your software stack and ask the question. So if you're not sure, go and speak to your accountant or your software tech people.
And the follow-up question is, do Kinore offer hands-on training on this?
On e-invoicing or on software. So we have the e-invoicing is the rules, and we have a full VAT team, bookkeeping team that are preparing themselves for this as well, right? Um, we also provide a lot of digitalization projects. So we support clients in moving from one software to another, or indeed just setting up a fresh software. So we definitely support. I think the best thing you can do is even just to temperature check and reach out, see what your own specific need is.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then what about companies who are not VAT registered? For example, they provide IT services, but they currently don't have customers in Ireland.
So the rollout only applies to B2B sales. So if you're not VAT registered, then you won't have a requirement. The whole point is to do that as part of that modernization.
Great, thank you. And then the next question we have is, will Revenue accept issuing VAT registration numbers for businesses who are not doing businesses in Ireland in order to comply? They have historically refused, or what about non-VAT registered businesses? So probably on a similar thread to the previous.
Probably in a similar thread, but it sounds very specific. So I'd say again, reach out to even us or your accountant to ask specific advice on your own structure. It sounds like if you've had issues there in the past, that maybe you need tailored support for that.
Okay. And the next question probably looks like would require specific advice, but I'll read it out. What about invoices sent and received from outside of Europe? Example, US, China supplier, and customers to invoice abroad.
So no, it's this only applies. But the reason why we have the invoicing and the VAT modernization, the real-time filings, it's all because that requirement comes in line for the EU. So if it's outside of the EU, it doesn't fall under this.
Okay, great. Um, and then what exactly qualifies as a large corporate for phase one compliance in November 2028? How will revenue define this threshold? We currently receive supplier invoices. So does that mean we need a channel like PEPL in place from the outset, even though we are a small SME?
So the large corporates is the large corporate division essentially. So it's big corporations or big Irish groups that fall in that first phase. So you just need to make sure you have a system that can accept it. The way that theoretically, the way that this will work is that you'll have a PEPL portal or an access point, and your supplier will as well. So the invoice gets generated by the supplier and gets uploaded to the PEPL connection point. That connects then to your connection point, and then you can download that into your system. So you will need a PEPL access point to be able to receive these e-invoices. That's part of the whole rollout. But a lot of the systems already have this in place, so it's probably making a connection. There will be specific step-by-step advice coming out from revenue, and what next steps are, how to create a PEPL account and whatnot. They haven't released anything as of yet, and we will likely have more webinars as more information is released, just to keep people informed.
Perfect. And then lastly, do we have any turnover slab for e-invoicing?
Do we have any turnover? Oh, is this turnover requirement? Is it?
Yeah.
What do you mean by slab? No, it's not to do with turnover. It's to do with where your activity is. So in phase two, it's all about the trigger for being included in phase two is that you have EU B2B sales, regardless of turnover level. So if you have those sales and your VAT register, you're going to be included in that second phase.
Perfect, great. And that's all the questions we currently have on the chat or the Q&A. Um, do any of our other attendees have any other questions they'd like to ask or any points they'd like Kiera or I to clarify?
Um, there was probably something actually that we could, just because we have a couple of minutes, I did include this in slides, so I was conscious there's a lot of information and we weren't sure how many questions we get. But the one thing that's worth pointing out is that you'll still have to file VAT returns. This e-invoicing won't remove that requirement. It just means that the revenue get data at a different time. But if you think about your VAT return, there's a lot more transactions within your VAT return. For example, if you have B2C sales, that won't be included in the C invoicing. So you still will have a requirement to file a VAT returns, just to clarify that.
Okay. And Kiera,
Mhm.
e-invoicing for B2C, do they have this requirement?
Not at the minute. There's no plans to include that as part of real-time reporting, and it doesn't fall under that VITA reform. So no plans as of yet.
Perfect. And then Kiera, will e-invoices go onto Xero or Dext?
Yeah,
Will
so a lot of people would use things like Dext or HubSpot or the likes where to facilitate like the recording of those invoices and then push them into accounting software. Those types of systems won't have a PEPAL access point. They won't generate invoices in that standard EN 16931 format. So the e-invoicing falls outside of their capabilities now. But as I said, there's loads of transactions there that won't fall under this requirement. So those systems still have a part to play in helping you manage a lot of the rest of your AP.
Okay, perfect. And then I suppose lastly, a question on VAT modernisation and cash basis requirements.
So that's a really good question, actually, Roisin, because I'm hearing a lot of people ask this about the VAT liability itself. So revenue get more data and a more real time and more real time view, but the liability itself still remains in the same payment terms. So if you're on a 2 monthly, 4 monthly, 6 monthly, your payment of your actual VAT liability still falls in the same date that it does right now. So it falls in
Okay,
line with that VAT filing, and the liability gets paid alongside that.
perfect. And then what about e-invoicing and bad debt?
So bad debt rules still apply. You still need to, this invoice still needs to be 6 months overdue. Businesses need to take the reasonable steps to recover it, and it has to be written off in your accounts. So those rules all still apply, regardless of e-invoicing.
Okay. And a question we have in the chat is, does this follow to revenue online?
Does this follow to revenue online? So yes, okay. I think I can understand the question means it's that's the real time element of this. So whenever you are issuing your e-invoices and it goes through PEPAL, it gets fed real time to revenue as well. So as I mentioned earlier on, it's not just about the flow of information from business to business, it's actually about the flow of information from business to revenue. So yes, everything from e-invoicing will flow into revenue in real time.
Okay. Will businesses need to split out their VAT returns when they're remitting some through e-invoice and some not?
So that's a good question as well. The advice we're given right now is everything needs to be included in your VAT return. So regardless if it goes into e-invoicing or not, that your VAT return still needs to be that snapshot of the activity in the period.
Okay, great. And then I suppose, in your professional opinion, what's the benefit to businesses?
Um, in theory, there are benefits, right? It's about supporting Ireland and being Ireland's digital strategy, right? Gives business real practical gains in terms of like faster processing, lower admin costs, fewer errors, and essentially more accurate VAT reporting. Um, it should mean that the VAT repayments are or invoices you receive them on a quicker basis, so you'll have a better view of your AP and your accounts receivable, in a real time view for your business customers. So there you've got a better view of your cash flow and everything. So there are benefits in there. It's all a bit more real time information, accurate information, and reducing the errors, reducing the admin. So in theory, there are cost benefits to this.
Perfect. And then I suppose lastly, Kiera, how will e-invoices go from system to system?
So yeah, the way that we're being told is that there'll be PEPAL access points. So your PEPAL access point gets connected to your accounting software. So if I'm on Xero or QuickBooks or whatever, my PEPAL access point will be connected to my accounting software. And let's say, Roshan, you're my customer. I'll generate my invoice and it goes to my PEPAL access point. That then reads that information, recognizes that it's your business by using like your VAT number, and that's the common thread, goes to your PEPAL access point, and then you're able to go in and download that information then into your software. It is all automated, but the advice we're being given is the PEPAL, your access point doesn't automatically flow to your system, that you have to download and pull it down.
Okay, great. And then I suppose we have time for one more question that's in the chat, although I feel this might be quite specific, but I can read it out for you here. So it says,
Okay.
does the solution support seamless invoice exchange between companies using different software providers? And what is the process for correcting and submitting a rejected invoice? Is an electronic signature required for e-invoices in Ireland?
Okay, so for the first question, software's yes. So if you think about it, the common thread there's the PEPAL. It's not the software itself. All these accounting softwares need to be compliant with PEPAL. So you could be on QuickBooks, I could be on Xero, and that doesn't matter because the format of the e-invoice is very specific. It's that EN16931 format. Um, what's the process for correcting and submitting rejected invoices? It's much like it is today. If there's an invoice that's incorrect, you issue a credit note or make an adjustment. That's that process should remain the same. Um, and then the signature, there's been no mention of an e-signature requirement. The PEPAL system is very secure, and as I said, it's already in place for a lot of businesses as it stands. So the requirement isn't there for an e-signature. Certainly, I haven't heard it anyway. The system is secure within itself without needing any kind of extra layers of control, I guess.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for your time, Kiera. Thank you everyone for all of your questions. They've been really, really informative. As Kiera referenced throughout her Q&A and through your presentation, if you do require specific advice, feel free to reach out directly to us or to your accountant and talk through, your individual queries as they relate to your business. Alternatively, the recording will be shared with each of you who have registered today after the call. And if anyone is looking for any support or any guidance, feel free to reach out to either myself or Kiera at hello@kinore.com.
Thanks for the time, everybody. Have a good day.
Have a great day, everybody.